Martin Zubimendi or Martin Zubimedical? Arsenal very, very close to signing the Spanish international. That's why we're bringing you another bonus edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Welcome back along to the pod, the second one of the day. Yes, I wasn't planning on doing two today. I was planning on finishing up with the first one, getting a little clip ready to go out a little bit later on in the day, which we've done. And then I thought, you know what? Let me take the kids out for lunch. It's half term. They're quite clearly bored at home. Obviously, I'm busy working. And so, they're waiting for any gaps that I have in which I can hopefully occupy them and we could do something a little bit fun. I said, you know what, kids, come on, let's go for lunch. The minute I ordered my food, boom, out came the news that Martin Zubimendi is set for an Arsenal medical. Now, the irony of all of this is that on this morning's live stream, on this morning's episode of the pod, I was having to bat away comments from people saying, why don't we just get deals done, man? Why do we take so long with everything? Look at Liverpool. They've managed to get their business already in order. They've got one player at the stage of a medical already. What's going on? Why aren't we capable of this? Why can't we do this? And lo and behold, just a few hours later, we get news that Arsenal are very close now to completing a deal for a player who's clearly been a target for a long, long time. So what we're going to do on this bonus episode of the pod, I'm going to bring you up to speed with exactly what has been reported, exactly what has been said, and we'll break it down. We'll try and make as much sense of it as we possibly can. And I'll share with you guys some views and some opinions on the whole subject. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Make this an interactive one. Get involved in the live chat. Let's say a few hellos and let's take some of your comments to start off with. Rumble says, afternoon, then goes on to say, not a fan of Zubimendi, first signing, very underwhelming. Look, I have concerns and reservations about Martin Zubimendi that I've expressed before. So for that reason, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and I'm not going to be jumping up and down and saying, oh my God, this is the most amazing piece of business. Clearly, the club feel it's a really good bit of business. The wider footballing world believes that this is a top player. Remember how much Liverpool wanted him last summer. Obviously, that never materialized. I think the general consensus is that Martin Zubimendi will be a great addition. And I'm not totally against the signing. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, what are we doing? This is a mess. This is a disgrace. No. Far from that. But I do have one major reservation about Martin Zubimendi, which we'll get into again a little bit later on in the pod. Avas says, Zubimendi's true ability will show on the pitch. He will elevate our build-up play immediately and will help us so much in controlling the tempo of the game. He then goes on to say, now let's get Gyökeres. Le Cordier says, of all the rumors, this one always seemed the most likely to me. Tom Hins says, what have we got here then? A second pod of the day. Harry's treating us well. I do try my best, mate. I do try my best. Naveen says, good move, top quality player. What else have we got in the chat? The Saxon says, Zubimendi is just the start of what promises to be a brilliant summer. I have full trust in Arteta and Berta. So lots of positive comments. A couple of, not so positive ones. I kind of sit in the middle on this. I got to be honest. We'll get into it in a bit. Sooty says, for me, Zubimendi is the easy deal as a replacement for Jorginho. So now it's wrapped up. Let's get the attacker/winger positions sorted. I get what you mean in the sense of, like, obviously this has been in the pipeline for some time. This is a deal that, from what we understand, Edu was kind of leading the charge on way before Andrea Berta even come in. So most of the groundwork, if not all of it, had already been done. The club were in a position to execute this sort of going into this summer. And obviously that kind of worked with Zubimendi's wants as well, because he didn't want to leave Real Sociedad at the end of last season from what we were reading and what we were hearing. So, yeah, look, I think it makes sense in the sense of he's a very similar player to Jorginho in a lot of ways. And in that, I see positives, but I also see a negative as well, which, again, we'll come on to in a little bit. But where I disagree with the kind of easy point, and I know that you've put it in quotation, so I know that you probably don't mean it in the sense of, oh, well, it was easy, click the fingers, drop of a hat, whatever, is that, you let Jorginho go, someone who was very much a squad player, who we brought in for around about 10 million quid. He was great value, by the way. And I don't think I really covered the Jorginho goodbye enough looking back on it now. He obviously put out a really kind of emotional video yesterday, and everybody was watching that and sort of looking back on it and thinking, yeah, what a servant we had here. And I did put a post out yesterday saying, like, for 10 million quid, when you consider the performances that he put in, when you consider the leadership, when you consider the response to his departure from so many of the young players who he clearly took under his wing during his time at the football club, he's obviously well loved and well respected and was a really, really good asset on the pitch and off the pitch as well. But the thing with Zubimendi is that he represents an upgrade in Jorginho, right? Because this is a guy who, is very much sought after, who is very much viewed as one of the better holding midfield players in world football. And Arsenal haven't gone out just to bring in a Jorginho replacement. Arsenal have gone out and spent north of 50 million quid to get this guy in. So that's a upping of the ceiling. Sometimes we talk about raising the floor in the squad. Sometimes we talk about raising the ceiling, breaking barriers and going to new levels. Having Zubimendi and Partey, because I think Partey is going to stay based on what we're reading and hearing at the minute, that is a much better combination than Partey and Jorginho was. Yes, you lose some experience, but make no mistake about it, Martin Zubimendi, despite being of a relatively young age still, is a very experienced operator. He's played on the biggest stages. He's a Spanish international, European champion, etc., etc. There's a lot to like about this, and there's a clear statement here being made by Arsenal. And I think if we keep Thomas Partey as well, then actually we've upgraded in that midfield area, which is ultimately what you set out to do, isn't it? Going into each and every transfer window. Can you make the squad better? Can you make the team better? Can you make the squad deeper, but not just deeper in terms of volume and numbers, deeper in terms of quality? And for Zubimendi to come in, and if he does have Thomas Partey there as well, whom he can share that role with at the start, I think that takes the pressure off of the Spaniard a little bit, allows him to kind of build into the role, grow into the role, adapt from Spanish football to English football. And, we could be onto a really, really good thing here. I'll get my kind of negative and my reservation out of the way. I kept saying we'll come to it later, but anybody that listens to this regularly will know that I'm talking about his physicality. I worry that Zubimendi playing as a lone six is a little bit lightweight and a little bit risky at times. And I think, yes, he will give us immense control in possession. I think he's a good line breaker. I think he's a very intelligent footballer, can receive the ball in pressured situations. I think he's got all of those things going for him. But I always think to be a really effective six in the Premier League, you need to have a bit more about you physically than Martin Zubimendi does. Now, can he build himself up? Can he use his intelligence to navigate around that potential problem? Do Arsenal slightly tweak the structure with him in the side to give him that little bit more protection, at least at the start, and to make sure that the team isn't vulnerable to counter-attacking situations, especially? And the reason I highlight those is because I think as a team, we've come from a place under Wenger and then Unai Emery where we were really, really susceptible on the transition, to a place now where we're probably one of the best teams at protecting ourselves against those scenarios. And that's partly because of the way we're set up and the structure, but it's partly because of the physical profiles that we have and the personnel that we have. We've got two big centre halves that if you drop the ball over the top of them, they're comfortable turning around and sprinting back towards their own goal. If they need to step out and be aggressors, they're comfortable in doing that as well. We've also got fullbacks who are centre backs in a lot of cases by trade and have that aerial ability, the height, generally speaking, as well, to be able to deal with balls over the top. And the way we can squeeze up and the way we can physically dominate makes a big, big difference. And it's why partly that and the setup, we're really, really good in terms of dealing with transitions against us. Zubimendi's arrival doesn't quite fit into that, but do we tweak the structure? As I say, do we put someone, closer to him? Do we bring, I don't know, let's say we get the centre forward that we're aiming for, right? And we don't want the centre forward coming back as deep as maybe Havertz does or as maybe Jesus does. Does that mean that Declan Rice can drop off a little bit deeper maybe? I'm not saying all the time, I'm not saying in possession, but out of possession, will Declan Rice's job be tweaked? Will it be partly to get in alongside Martin Zubimendi and give him the platform to go on and dictate the game in a way that I don't think Declan Rice does as well as the Spaniard from the base of midfield? Rice has other things going for him, right? He's got a great ball carrier, really physical, really powerful, all of those things. It's not to diminish what he is or what he's good at, but I'd rather have Martin Zubimendi pulling the strings from deep, but he's going to need a bit of a screen around him and he's going to need a bit of protection around him. So it's going to be interesting to see how Arsenal navigate all of this. Let's bring you up to speed with the report then. Let's have a look at exactly what was said by Sami Mokbel when this news broke just a couple of hours ago now. So he says, Zubimendi set for Arsenal medical before £51 million move. And there's some real good nuggets of information in this. It's a really well put together story. Real Sociedad midfielder Martin Zubimendi is set to have a medical before completing a switch to Arsenal. Well-placed sources have confirmed to BBC Sport that all the relevant documents in relation to the Spain international switch to the Emirates have been signed, with the deal entering its closing stages. So it looks like we've gone release clause, bang, there you go, all signed up, signed off on the structure if it's not going to be done in one go. Don't know the details, by the way. I know that for you to really officially trigger the release clause in La Liga, you have to go and deposit the money to the league, not the club. So it's unclear at the moment whether Arsenal have done that or whether Arsenal have agreed some sort of structure with Real Sociedad that will allow them to pick the player up for £51 million in English money, of course, which is the value essentially of the release clause. But maybe it's done over a period of time. I'm not entirely sure. Okay. And there isn't really any mention of how that works, but it does say the transfer is now subject to a medical that Arsenal are in the process of organizing. Because the paperwork for Zubimendi's switch has been completed, all parties are relaxed about the scheduling of the medical, but there is a will to wrap up the formalities of this deal swiftly. Once the 26-year-old passes the medical, Arsenal will be in a position to announce Zubimendi's signing. So we're literally one step away here. He has a £51 million release clause with all payment structures between Real Sociedad and Arsenal already agreed. Okay, so that kind of speaks to what I was saying. It looks like just based on that, and it doesn't really confirm it 100%, I don't think, but I guess what it tells me is that they have come to some sort of agreement with regards to the structure, and that structure has been agreed by both parties. So it's not been the case of, as I mentioned, going to the league and saying, there's the money, thank you very much, let's do it, like we did with Thomas Partey. Arsenal have been long-term admirers of the player and have been working on a deal to sign him for a number of months. In addition to his imminent arrival, the Gunners want to sign a new centre-forward with Benjamin Sesko and Victor Gyökeres among their preferred targets. Talks over new contracts for Saka, Saliba, Gabriel, Trossard, Partey, Lewis Skelly, and Nwaneri are all ongoing. So Arsenal busy in a number of ways this summer by the looks of things, not just bringing in new faces, but in terms of securing the futures of those that they already have at the club. Why do Arsenal want Zubimendi? Samuel Mokbel goes on to write. He says, since treading the well-worn path from Sociedad's famed academy to the first team, he's become one of the most sought-after midfielders in Europe. He's been linked to Barcelona and Madrid in recent years, and last summer rejected an approach from Liverpool. He's largely played as a deep-lying midfielder since making his debut in 2019, although he's capable of playing in a more advanced role. Arsenal were heavily reliant on defensive midfielder Thomas Partey this season. While Arteta wants the Arsenal midfielder to sign a new contract, signing Zubimendi would bolster Arsenal's options considerably. He proved his ability on the international stage last summer when he started off the bench in Spain's 2-1 defeat of England in the final of Euro 2024 after replacing the injured Rodri. Now, I was at that game, and I remember when Rodri went off, everybody going, oh, this is it now. England are definitely going to win it now because Rodri's gone off. And Zubimendi came in and did a wonderful, wonderful job. Now, again, I think he's clearly got a lot of quality when it comes to being on the ball and looking to dictate and looking to make things happen and looking to set the tempo, slowing it down when necessary, increasing it again when necessary. That is clearly what Martin Zubimendi is good at. The one concern and the one worry for me is he powerful enough to hold that role and allow us to continue playing, I beg your pardon, in our current structure, or do we need to slightly tweak and adjust to accommodate him? Either way, Arsenal have clearly been eyeing him up for a long time. Arsenal clearly believe he's the solution. And the irony of it all is that on the day where, we spent a lot of the morning's pod with people going, why don't we just get stuff done? Arsenal are literally done with this. He's going to have the medical. The window isn't open yet, so nothing can officially go through anyway. But with everything, relaxed and everything agreed now, it's just a case of when rather than if. So that should give people some encouragement, especially because there have been a few reports, haven't there, over the course of this whole sort of Zubimendi story being a thing, to the effect of, well, Real Madrid are interested now, and Real Madrid are tempting him, and actually he's considering Real Madrid, and actually Xabi Alonso really, really wants him, and that might be a problem for Arsenal. It sounds to me like Arsenal have got this in the bag, and it's just a case of, as I say, when rather than if, which is obviously good news for the Gunners. Right, let's take some of your thoughts and let's take some of your questions from the live chat. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Inspired Channel says there's something out at the moment from Build about Benjamin Sesko. Is that right? Let me have a look. Let's see if I can verify that. While I'm doing that, if you haven't done so already, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all the rest of it. If you're listening on the audio platforms, do leave us a review as well. All of that stuff very, very much does help. Yeah, here we go. So, breaking from Build, Benjamin Sesko will be left out of RB Leipzig's pre-season tour as Arsenal are positioning themselves for his signing. Arsenal and United are particularly interested in him. RB Leipzig would start talks at 59 million with the hopes of getting 84 million. That's a big jump, isn't it? It's a massive jump. You're talking about what? 20 million quid, more than that. I don't think you're going to get 84 million pounds, guys. Euros maybe at a push, at a stretch, but certainly not. Certainly not when it comes to pounds. That's for sure. Look, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail on tomorrow's episode when we have the time to kind of break it down, to do a little bit more research and a little bit more digging on this particular story. But it's crazy, isn't it? I talked about it a little bit on the pod this morning. One day it's Gyökeres, then it's Sesko, then it's Gyökeres again, then it's Sesko, and then it's Gyökeres again, and it's just backwards and forwards, and it's so mentally draining. That is speculation, as far as I'm aware. When it comes to a lot of the outlets, you've got to be careful. It's not to sit there and say that all their work is rubbish and none of it means anything. I would never do that, because I've seen it now. I understand how much hard work goes into getting those stories and all the rest of it, and how much research goes in and how much contact building has to take place and all the rest of it. So I would never sit here and shit on their stories, but I'm just wary of what I'm going to kind of fall into the trap of believing at this stage. We'll talk about these reports. We'll discuss them. We'll keep you across them right here on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast throughout the duration of the summer. But this morning we were talking about why it's probably going to be Victor Gyökeres, only for this afternoon to hear that RB Leipzig have left him out of their preseason tour because Arsenal are positioning themselves to sign him. Look, it's quite clear that RB Leipzig are happy to move him on this summer as long as they get their money, right? It's normal practice in that case to leave a player out so you don't risk any injury, so you don't risk any issues, so you don't risk any problems. That doesn't mean that it's Arsenal that are ready there to pounce. It could be open still. It could be, well, look, we know that this guy's going to leave. We think that he's going to be on the move in the summer. Let's not jeopardize getting 60, 70, 80 million quid in the door for him by taking him on a meaningless preseason friendly tour that ends up with him potentially picking up an injury and the whole thing coming crashing down around us and him. So leaving him out, that doesn't really tell you that it's Arsenal. But obviously that report from Bild, it does mention Arsenal in there. And that's why people, I think, have sort of jumped onto that as much as they have. Let's take some of your comments. Nathan says, where is he? Why haven't we already done this? We're moving slow. Sack Arteta now. I bet Berta and Arteta hate each other. We left Highbury to compete with Real Madrid. All the stuff that I'm sure you're hearing online at the moment. But it looks like we're very, very close now to completing our first deal of the summer. And it's a significant one too. Andy says, how happy are you that he'll get a full pre-seasoning, given that physical prep might be the top challenge he faces? Yeah, it's a great point. You know, I do worry about that. I am concerned about that. But as you say, you know, there's probably a benefit to having a full pre-season, and Arsenal getting this done nice and early. Okay, it's obviously been on the cards for a while now. It's not like they've woken up yesterday, gone, let's sign Martin Zubimendi, and they've been super efficient to the point where we've got it done. Sometimes you have to wait for stuff. Sometimes you have to wait for the right time. Last summer, he was on his way to Anfield. That's what everybody was telling us. And he didn't want to go there in the end. You know, he wanted that extra season at Real Sociedad. He wanted to continue in the role that he was already in. And I think sometimes when you know the player's the right player and you really, really want a player, you've got to take a little bit of a step back and allow them to come to you as well. Now, obviously, you want to show your intent. Obviously, you want to show that, you know, you mean business and that you really value them and want them as part of your team and part of your setup. But there's a fine balance. It's like what we were talking about on the last episode, right? There were people saying, we knew we wanted Sesko from ages ago. Why haven't we already agreed a deal? And I said, well, we had obviously gone to RB Leipzig in January, got the message from them that he wasn't for sale in January. Had we then started saying, okay, cool, fine, fair enough, but let's start negotiating for the summer and talking to the player and trying to turn his head, that would have been downright disrespectful and would have put us in a much weaker position when we ended up coming to that table eventually to discuss the club-to-club stuff. So I think it's important that you do things the right way. And obviously Arsenal have been courting Zubimendi for a while, have been speaking to Zubimendi for a while, and we're finally in a position where we're ready to execute on this one. But Andy, it's a great point about him getting a full pre-season. I completely agree. The Saxon says, I try so hard to ignore the crazy rumors. Instead, I will wait for an official announcement. I know. But as someone put it earlier, like, it's kind of fun as well, discussing the rumors. It can be draining at times. I'll tell you when it's draining. It's not draining when you hear rumors or when you hear different stories. It's draining when people complain about stuff that is clearly nothing more than a rumor. So, like, for example, yesterday we talked a little bit about Julian Alvarez of Atletico Madrid, because there was a report that came out from Marca in which it was claimed that Arsenal really like the player and are keen on the player. And, you know, I said it at the time, we did a pod, we discussed it. And I said at the time, look, I don't know how legit this is. I don't know how serious this is. I don't know if this is going to happen. But if it were a possibility, I really, really like the player, blah, blah, blah. I had a load of people replying, going, this is never going to happen, blah, blah. I mean, I literally said that. And that's when it becomes draining for me, the transfer window, when people are literally outraged by things that haven't even happened, where people are outraged by hypothetical conversations. If you want to hear about actual football and actual football alone and never hear about transfers or any discussions around that, then you might as well not consume any content for the entire summer, because I can tell you that's what it's all going to be about. It's going to be about looking back for a bit and then looking forward. Once you get to that looking forward stage, it is all ifs, buts, and maybes. That's just the nature of the game. Sean says, Harry, you are right about Zubimendi does not possess that solidarity as a number 6. I think Mikel would tweak the formation of our midfield with Zubimendi in it. I do too. I think Declan Rice's role would be slightly adjusted. Afsar says, do you think Zubimendi will be a backup to Partey if Partey stays, that is? Well, first of all, I think he will stay. I think for the conversations to still be ongoing and for there to be, as reported, a real willingness on both sides to make this happen, I think there's a really good chance that it does. I don't think he'll be seen as a backup. I think Partey will be there to help manage Zubimendi's transition. And, you know, if you got both of them there, that's great, you know, and there might even be games where it's worth playing both of them. You might lose Declan Rice to an injury. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but you might at some point, in which case you can play them both. You might lose Martin Odegaard at some point, in which case, if you don't want to throw one of the young lads in, you know, you could throw Zubimendi into that midfield, slightly tweak and adjust the shape and the formation. There's a lot of things we can do, and we will evolve. You know, we will constantly evolve, I think, under Mikel Arteta. That's one thing that he's shown us, that he's willing to adapt and change. And each season, you know, things look a little bit different. And I think that's necessary in order to keep moving forward and to keep the pace and keep up with the Joneses, if you like. So, yeah, I don't think he'll be his backup, but I think they'll share the role, is how I would put it. So he says, let's hope it's not another Vieira signing, keeping the faith, and we'll reserve judgment until I see him in the team if he's the right player or not. Look, Zubimendi's been on everybody's radar as a top player in Europe for a while now. So it's not quite like the Vieira signing in that sense, because this guy's got a much bigger reputation. There's a much bigger body of work, I would argue, to go back and look over, from which you can make stronger judgments. With Fabio Vieira, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know who he was. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm sure people who are across Portuguese football and who cover Porto and were, you know, following them a lot closer than I were, would have known a lot about Fabio Vieira. But when we signed him, boy, that was out of the blue. I remember sitting down one day and sort of doing a stream, and it was literally it just popped up that Arsenal are signing Fabio Vieira. And I was like, what? There's been no speculation about this. There's been no ongoing story. This hasn't been a talking point at all. And boom, out of the blue, Arsenal have signed this player. And look, he's not going to be a fixture in the Arsenal team regularly, I don't think. He's one that I'd be looking to move on this summer. And even if you can get half of what you paid for him, which I think even that might be a push at the moment, then you let him go, in my opinion. We gambled on him. It didn't work, as far as I'm concerned. Jid says, if Zubi signs and Partey stays, will that mean Rice and Marino will play left 8? And if so, would Marino be okay being a squad player? I know people will talk a lot about having big squads and rotation. Yeah, look, if I go back to when we signed Mikel Marino, who also would have a great relationship, by the way, with Martin Zubimendi, which I think would help. If I go back to when we signed Mikel Marino, though, and I was criticized quite heavily, actually, for saying this, I always said that he would be coming in as a squad player. I always said that he'd be coming in as an option rather than the go-to. And obviously, the way things have gone this season, we've ended up turning him into a go-to, but at centre forward, which definitely wasn't the plan, by the way. But yeah, I think Marino will know that he's going to be in and out of the side when everybody's fit and everybody's available. I think he knew that when he signed. I don't think that's changed. I think he's played as a centre forward, which meant he was a starter every week because we didn't have anybody else. But I think if we did have a centre forward, he would have finished this season being in and out of the team and on and off the bench. And I think, you know, we've got to think about it as a collective now. I think I agree with you, because I think you're suggesting that, you know, big squads and rotation, you know, it's a good thing, but it's not all that it's cracked up to be. Because you say, let's be honest, managers don't rotate as much as fans pretend they do, because it disrupts momentum and consistency. I agree. And I still don't think that Mikel Arteta is going to rotate crazily with a few new players coming in through the door. But I do think that this season really shone a light on the need to have more options and the need to have more backups. And the problem that Arsenal have, and I've said this for a while, again, this is something that feels like a bit of an ongoing kind of, you know, speech that I give, preach that I give, however you want to put it. If you bring in versatile players and you compromise on numbers in order to prioritize versatility, or let me put that in another way, right? So you bring in a load of versatile players and then you're writing out a list, right? So I might do, let's say I'm writing the front line out. Yeah. So I might write at centre forward, Havertz, and then Jesus' name underneath. Those are my two centre forward options. I'd probably put Marino now as the third. And then on the right wing, I'm putting Saka. And then underneath, I'm putting Nwaneri. And then on the left, I'm putting Martinelli. And then I'm putting Trossard. So you get where I'm going with this, right? I'm putting names down. I'm trying to build a bigger picture of my squad. I think the problem that we've had at Arsenal for a few years now is that we've looked at versatility first. And while that's good in a lot of ways, it means then if you lose one body, you can be short in multiple positions. Okay, so a great example of that is Kai Havertz, right? Before we signed Mikel Merino, he was a centre forward and he was a left 8. If Kai Havertz got injured, you were short in the centre forward department and you were short in the left 8 position because you were relying on that player to cover across 2 positions. We brought in Jurriën Timber because he could play right back, centre back, left back. We lost him in that first season, which meant that we lost him as a right back option, we lost him as a centre back option, and we lost him as a left back option. So in the end, where we were trying to spread that player across 3 positions, we actually ended up cutting our noses off to spite our face because this pursuit of versatile players and the prioritization of versatility can, if you're not careful, leave you short of bodies. And when you lose that body, if you're relying on them to do multiple jobs, it leaves you short in multiple areas. So I think the versatility thing was something that we tried. I think it's something that we need to, I'm not saying completely abandon because I quite like it in some senses, but it's something that you need to be really careful in how you build towards, because if you build it wrong and one body goes down, one player goes down, one person picks up a long-term injury, you can leave yourself short in multiple areas, and that can be a big, big problem. Let's take a few more of your comments and questions before we sign out. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well if you're brand spanking new. And if you haven't done so already, leave us a review on audio. All of that stuff really, really does help. Martin Zubimendi, Martin Zubimedical. He is close, very close to becoming an Arsenal player. Gary says, I see our only missing thing from midfield, an explosive, powerful ball carrier like Cunha, Morgan Rogers type, Eze, or someone like that. But Arteta uses the wings to open up teams anyway. So that's why we don't have that. I think I kind of half agree with you, Gary, in that I think it's good to have attacking players that carry the ball and create all sorts of chaos and drag people in and suck people in and attract people in. All of that is really, really important. Morgan Rogers is really good at that, by the way. But I'm not sure that I'm not sure that, you know, we're built to play like that. And, you know, some people will say that's wrong, and that's fine. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the last episode, which was structure is great and structure gives you a platform. But in order to be successful and to overcome challenges like low blocks, which have been a problem for us all of last season, then you need to have variety. And the only way you get variety is by giving people creative freedom. And so I'm not really too concerned about the personnel when it comes to the midfield in terms of doing that. I think we could do with wingers that are a little bit more aggressive, that take people on a little bit more often. But I think Odegaard can carry. I think Rice can carry. But teams tend to shut us down through the middle. I think Mikel Arteta's been forced to use those wide positions maybe a bit more than his ideal game model, you know, would have us doing that. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But it's a really good point. Really good question. Going to take another really, really short pause, in fact, and we'll carry on for a little bit longer, actually. Why not? You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a moment.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. Let's take a few more of your questions. Why not? Why not? 88 miles per hour says, so we've got 2 Mikels and 2 Martins now. Yeah, that's going to get confusing in the dressing room, isn't it? We're going to have to call him Zubi, I think. And I guess Martin Odegaard can be called Skipper. That way none of them get called Martin, and there shouldn't be any problem there. Max says, what do you make of Arsenal being ranked 60th in Europe since 2020 spent on strikers and attackers? That tells me Mikel cannot find balance and relies too much on the same players, causing injuries. I think that's a little bit of a red herring as a statistic or as a graphic or however it is they put that out. And I'll explain why. When Mikel arrived, think about what he had and think about what he didn't have, okay? So he had a defense comprising of Socrates and Shkodran Mustafi. Not good enough. Not good enough in the slightest. In attack, he had Aubameyang and he had Alexander Lacazette. And he had Nicolas Pepe, who the club had not long before gone and spent a record fee on. He had Mesut Ozil at the club as well. So when he came in, I completely understand why he felt it was right to build from the back. And over time, that's proven to be right because we've built ourselves a really solid core. We've established ourselves as a real strong defensive unit. And that has been the platform upon which we've become much more competitive than we were prior. So I don't think he was wrong at the beginning. And then you fast forward a little bit and you think about who was coming through. We had a very young Gabby Martinelli who grew with the team and developed into a very competent winger. You had Bukayo Saka coming through, who's gone on to become one of the best wingers in world football. And so 2 of those 3 attacking positions were already, in Arteta's mind, resolved. He brought in Jesus, he brought in Kai Havertz. We brought in Willian unsuccessfully, let him go, all the rest of it. But I think only last season was I very sort of frustrated by the lack of spending on a striker because, quite frankly, in the 2 seasons prior, we'd smashed our goal scoring record in each of those seasons. So goals weren't the problem. So that's why I felt at that point the criticism around the striker and the lack of was a little bit unfair. We were scoring goals as a collective. Now that the goals from the rest of the team have dropped off a little bit, there is this greater desire to see a striker come in. And yeah, I think we're at that point now where we could really do with one. And that's the next piece in the puzzle. No doubt about that. I said that last summer as well. It's the next piece in the puzzle. So we're at that stage now. But I don't really have too much of a gripe with what he did previously and how we got to this point that we're in now. Because we've obviously built in the right way because we've made progress year upon year upon year. And even if you look at this season as a failure, which a lot of people do, and you factor in how much we dropped off in the Premier League, we went to a Champions League semi-final, which is something that this club hadn't managed for years and years and years, since 2008, I think. Is that right? A long, long time ago. So, yeah, I'm okay with the way we've gone about building, but we're at that stage now where we really do need to invest in that position. Okay, I'm going to take one more before I go. I think my kids are waiting for me to go and play football in the garden. Oh, God, give me strength. Jid says, I've asked this question before. Do you think the squad lacks steel? When pedigree teams lose, they usually come out defiant and saying never again. When we face disappointment, we wallow in self-pity. I feel we still have a soft underbelly. I don't know. I don't really feel like we do wallow too much. I think our drop-off when we fell away in the league this season and then our sort of fall-off subsequent to that was because our focus was elsewhere. And we had all the problems that we did in terms of injuries. I actually think mentally this team is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. But again, I'll roll out one of my general theories around football, which is questioning and criticizing mentality. It's always something I'm really careful of and something I normally walk around rather than through, because how can you measure one's mentality? It's based on outcomes. But if the outcome isn't what you wanted, that doesn't by default mean that your attitude was wrong. Okay, so let's take, for example, I don't know, a more real life example, right? Let's say I want to learn how to play a guitar. Okay, if I have a lesson and don't learn anything, or don't pick up what I need to pick up in the short space of time that I'm allotted, and so the result isn't there, the outcome isn't there, it doesn't mean that I went into it with the wrong attitude or with the wrong mentality. It could be lots of things. I wasn't good enough. My teacher wasn't good enough. What I was trying to learn was too advanced for someone of my level. A basic lack of musical understanding meant that, you know, I couldn't get there because that was designed for someone else. Like, do you see what I mean? There's so many things that it can be. There's so many factors. So when people say mentality, I'm always like, whoa, how do you even judge that? You're judging it purely based on outcome. But just because the outcome you want is not the one you ended up with, it doesn't mean that the attitude or the mentality was wrong. So I'm always fearful of going down that route and leveling that criticism at people. But yeah, anyway, right. Going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on this second episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner today. If there's anything else new, maybe we'll bring you a third. Who knows? There is a little bit of a Sesco update from Build. Check it out. I'll do a little bit of digging and we'll discuss it in more detail on tomorrow's pod. Otherwise, I'll see you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Goodbye.